Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from American heavy metal crew Queensryche, entitled Digital Noise Alliance. These guys have been kicking around for almost 40 years now and have had a pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Interesting career, shall we say. Yeah. That's the nice way of putting it. Now don't get me wrong, early records like Rage for Order, Operation Mindcrime, and Empire remain beloved, acclaimed darlings of the 1980s metal scene. They've got lots of hit songs on them. They've aged pretty well. Operation Mindcrime in particular is often still regarded as one of the greatest concept albums ever made. All of these albums, Queensryche in general, credited with having helped birth what we now know as progressive metal. But unfortunately, as the 90s raged on, and as metal became less and less popular, so too did Queensryche, and in an attempt to kind of get with the times, they began dabbling with alternative rock and adult contemporary music to absolutely horrid effect. And though the 2000s were objectively better by comparison, they weren't great either. If anything, Queensryche was suddenly more uninspired and drab and desperate than ever before, resorting to half-baked cover albums like Take Cover, and the completely unnecessary cash-in sequel that is Operation Mindcrime 2. It didn't help either that all the while Geoff Tate's voice was pretty visibly and rapidly disintegrating. I mean, it got to a point where he wasn't just having trouble hitting high notes, he was having trouble maintaining basic pitch. As such, in 2012, Geoff Tate was kicked out in favor of Crimson Glory's Todd LaTorre, and honestly, ever since then, they've kind of been on a roll. They finally, truly for realsies, got back to their roots and released something of quality with 2013's self-titled record, Queensryche. They continued to release some pretty high-quality material with Condition Human and The Verdict. They went on a couple big tours with the Scorpions. They saw legitimate success. As far as the metal world is concerned, Queensryche was really, truly, officially back and kind of kicking ass again. With that in mind, good news. If you like the Todd LaTorre era of Queensryche, you're probably going to like Digital Noise Alliance. The record is slick and punchy and dynamic with a lot of strong riffs, a lot of anthemic, catchy, endearing hooks and melodies, introspective lyrics, and, a surprising amount of depth and substance. Behind the Walls, for instance, is a moody, cinematic, and evocative kind of prog metal burner with some wailing choruses and some very emotionally charged wails and howls from the aforementioned Todd LaTorre, sounding in top form across this whole thing, might I add. Maybe one of his best vocal performances to date with Queensryche. I like the more minimalistic approach to synthesizers on this thing. It makes everything feel kind of eerie, but you also have these muscular riffs kind of moving everything along at a really nice pace. There's also In Extremis, which opens this record with some very upbeat and confident kind of prog-laced classic heavy metal and hard rock. A simple but effective number that appropriately harkens to some of Queensryche's earliest known recordings from like the self-titled EP and their official debut, The Warning. Very similarly, too, you have Chapters and Lost in Sorrow, which, honest to God, would not be out of place on Operation Mindcrime. They ooze a very similar kind of vibe and atmosphere. They're just as evocative, they're just as immersive, and they're just as fun and catchy and good and stuff. From what I understand, Michael Wilton went as far as to use a lot of old equipment that he had previously used on older Queensryche records, like The Warning, like Rage for Order, like Operation Mindcrime, and no doubt that helps add to the very authentic 1980s Queensrychian vibe and feel of this. A cynical and slightly clueless critic could argue that the band are pandering to nostalgia with that in mind, but fuck whoever would make that argument, and honestly, if that were the case, who fucking cares? This is what most people want to hear from Queensryche anyway, so fuck it, pander away, I guess. However, if that same cynical and clueless critic were to argue that there's a dip in quality, on the second half of this thing, I think then I would have to agree with them. Honest to God. Because, yeah, this thing's pretty front-loaded for sure. Forest, for instance, is a trancy, fluffy, keyboard-driven number that doesn't really go anywhere. It just feels aimless, directionless, almost as if it's lost in a forest itself and isn't really sure what to do. There's also Tormentum, which does have some more strong hooks and some, you know, triumphant and regal dual guitar work, but it's also 7.5 minutes long and spends a lot of time building up tension but never delivering any catharsis or climax. And in a head-scratchingly odd move, Queensryche opt to end the album with a very paint-by-numbers cover of Billy Idol's Rebel Yell. It's an unnecessary addition to the record, something that was very clearly tacked on just to make it longer, and it reminds me of, you know, late 2000s Geoff Tate-era Queensryche in a way that makes me semi-uncomfortable. If I could rate each half of this album individually, I think I would give the first half a 3.5 out of 5, and I think I would give the second half a 2.5 out of 5. So, for the sake of this video, let's split the difference, go right down the middle with a 3 out of 5. Definitely not as cohesive or as consistent as the last few albums that Queensryche have released, in my opinion, but ultimately Digital Noise Alliance is still a pretty solid, fun, well-made collection of, like, 1980s heavy metal, prog metal riffery and jams and fun. Longtime Queensryche fans will very likely be elated with this thing, more power to ya. Anyone looking for a more laid-back, kind of classic 80s metal or rock record should be elated with this as well. I've no clue really what the future has in store for Queensryche, but if they continue making albums of at least this quality, I'll still tune in. I'll still check them out. I mean, obviously, I want something that's, you know, entirely great instead of just kind of great and then kind of okay. But fuck it. After 20 years of weird experimentations and all kinds of weird, dumb nonsense with Geoff Tate, I'll take what I can fucking get. Queensryche know they have a lot of time to make up for, and they're not wasting any of it. I respect and appreciate the fuck out of that. 3 out of 5. It's a decent record. It's alright. It's fun. I enjoyed it. It's not perfect, but fuck it. It's also not Operation Mindcrime 2 or any of the solo shit that Geoff Tate did. So, yeah, I'm good with that. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.